my family's eyes, I have always been the daughter who chose wrong career, wrong city, wrong priorities. My mother said it at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, right in front of my aunt and two cousins. She gave up a perfectly good law school acceptance to chase some government desk job. She said it like I wasn't sitting 4 feet away, cutting the sweet potato casserole she'd asked me to bring. The morning my younger brother's engagement party was announced, my stepfather called me. Not to ask if I could make it. To ask if I needed help buying a dress that was appropriate for the occasion. I told him I had something. He said, "Something nice, though? Audrey's family is they have standards, sweetheart." I said I understood. I did not explain what I actually did for work. I never had. Not because I was ashamed, the opposite really, but because, in my family, the explanation always landed wrong. They heard federal employee and imagined a woman pushing paper behind bulletproof glass somewhere. They were so certain they already knew what I was that correcting them felt like arguing with a wall. So I stopped. My name is Leigh. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 4 years, I have served as a federal judge in the Eastern District of Virginia. I was confirmed at 28, the youngest in the district's history. My docket includes cases involving national security, complex financial fraud, and constitutional challenges that get picked up by the wire services. I have written opinions that law professors assign in their second-year classes. I have 3 clerks who are smarter than most people I have ever met, and I spend my evenings reading briefs that run to 400 pages. My family thinks I process permits for a mid-level agency somewhere near the Beltway. My mother had, at some point, decided this was the most polite version of reality she could offer at dinner parties. I had stopped fighting it. The engagement party was held at a country club outside of Charlottesville, the kind of place where the valet takes your keys without making eye contact, where the bourbon comes in crystal that costs more than my first car, and where the guest list runs 3 pages and is organized by social tier. My brother had landed himself a woman named Audrey, whose family had been members here for 40 years. Her father owned a regional bank. Her mother chaired 2 charitable boards. They were lovely people, actually. Warm, well-mannered, genuinely happy. It was the extended guests I wasn't sure about. I drove down from Washington on a Saturday morning. I'd had a sentencing hearing the previous afternoon that ran until almost 7, and I'd worked through most of Friday night to prepare remarks for a judicial conference the following Monday. I was tired in that specific, bone-deep way that comes from too many weeks of too many early mornings. I wore a navy-wrap dress I'd bought 2 years ago and had never had occasion to wear. Simple pearl earrings. My hair up because I'd run out of time to do anything with it. I pulled into the valet line and handed over my keys to a young man who thanked me by name, which caught me off guard until I realized he must have had a list. I walked in alone. The room was already half full, and I immediately spotted my mother near the far window, standing beside my stepfather in a cluster of people I didn't know. She looked beautiful. She always did at events like this. She was in cream silk and had clearly had her hair done that morning. She saw me come in, and I watched her face do the thing it always does. A brief flicker of something like apology, quickly smoothed into a practiced smile. "Leigh, honey, come here." I crossed the room and kissed her cheek. My stepfather shook my hand. He had the kind of handshake that communicates hierarchy. Firm, perfunctory, over quickly. "You look nice," my mother said in a tone that meant she had hoped for something a little more. The couple she introduced me to were friends of Audrey's parents, a man who ran a private equity firm out of Richmond and his wife, who taught at the University of Virginia's Darden School. They were polite in the way that people are polite when they have already sorted you and moved on. We exchanged the standard pleasantries. "Lovely venue, so exciting. Have you met the groom's family yet?" Then the man, I'll call him my mother's friend's husband because that's all he ever was to me, asked what I did. "I work in the federal system," I said. I always said it that way first, to see where people went. He nodded. "Which agency?" "The judiciary, actually." He nodded again, slower this time. "Administration?" I paused. "No, I'm a judge." He laughed, not unkindly exactly, more reflexively, the way people laugh when they think they've misheard. "A judge? Well, aren't you ambitious?" And then, before I could say anything else, he turned to my stepfather and pivoted to golf. I found a glass of water and went to find my brother. Owen was across the room with Audrey, glowing in the uncomplicated way that newly engaged people glow. He hugged me, genuinely, fully, the way he used to when we were kids, and introduced me to the small circle around him. His friends from college, an old roommate, a cousin of Audrey's, who worked in pharmaceutical sales. "And this is my sister," Owen said. "She works for the government." "Great," said the college friend, already looking past me. Audrey whispered something to Owen, and they drifted away toward a group arriving at the door, and I stood there for a moment in the middle of the room, holding my water glass, completely alone. I was used to this. It never got easier, but I was used to it. The seating at dinner was arranged by someone who clearly understood that families should be managed carefully. I was placed at a table near the back, not the back, but the second tier back, with Owen's college friends and two of Audrey's cousins I'd never met. My mother was at the front table with Audrey's parents, and the event planner, and a man I recognized as the regional Republican Party chairman. I sat down and introduced myself. The cousins were friendly enough. We talked about the drive down, about Charlottesville traffic, about whether the engagement had been a surprise. Normal things. Fine things. I ate my salad and smiled and refilled my water glass twice. And then my mother appeared beside my chair. She leaned down and spoke at a volume that she must have thought was quiet, but wasn't. "Leigh, I just want to say, Audrey's mother was asking about the family. I didn't want to get into the whole government thing because it's complicated to explain, so I just said you work in public service. Is that okay?" I looked up at her. "You told her I work in public service." "It's technically true. Mom, I'm a federal judge." She tilted her head, the way she does when she thinks I'm being difficult. "I know what you are, sweetheart. I just mean it doesn't translate easily at these things. People don't always know what to make of it. You know how it sounds." I did know how it sounded. It sounded like the highest appointed legal office you can hold without a presidential election. But I didn't say that. "It's fine," I said. "Don't worry about it." She patted my shoulder and went back to the front table. I sat with my fork resting on the edge of my plate for a long moment. The man to my left, one of Owen's friends, fresh out of business school, working at a consulting firm in Charlotte, had apparently overheard. He tried to be kind about it. "Family stuff is always awkward at these things," he said. "It is," I agreed. "What's the public service angle? Like city council, that kind of thing?" "Federal court," I said. "Oh, like you work for a judge?" "I'm one," I said pleasantly. He blinked. Then he laughed the same laugh the private equity man had laughed. Reflexive, slightly confused. "Seriously, how old are you?" 31. Wow. Is that normal?" "Not especially." He seemed unsure what to do with this information, so he defaulted to "that's cool" and returned to his bread roll. The main course arrived. The conversation moved on. I ate a very good filet, drank half a glass of Merlot, and listened to the cousin on my right describe a road trip she'd taken through New Mexico. It was a perfectly pleasant story. I was grateful for it. What happened next, I did not plan. I want to be clear about that. I had my phone on silent, face down, tucked next to my plate. I glance at it occasionally during meals when I'm expecting something time-sensitive, an opinion deadline, a clerk flagging an emergency motion. I don't make it a habit, but I'd been tracking a matter all week. When I turned the phone over, I had 4 missed calls from my chief clerk, whose name in my contacts is just H, and 2 texts. The first said, "Emergency TRO request filed this afternoon. Petitioner's counsel wants to reach you directly. Have your number. Okay to give?" The second, sent 40 minutes later, said, "Judge, I'm sorry to push on a Saturday. Clerk of court is asking if you can call in. Motion is politically sensitive. Your call." I set my fork down. The consultant noticed. "Everything okay?" "Work," I said. "On a Saturday?" "Courts don't always wait." I pushed my chair back, excused myself, and walked toward the hallway near the coat check, away from the noise of the room. I called H. The matter was a temporary restraining order connected to a case involving a federal contractor. I can't say more than that, and petitioner's counsel had filed same day, claiming imminent irreparable harm. The clerk of court wanted a decision on whether I would hear argument Monday morning or refer to another judge on the rotation. I asked 2 questions, listened, asked one more, and told H I would review the filing by tonight and send guidance by 9 p.m. It took 11 minutes. I stood in the hallway with my back to the wall and did my job. When I came back into the dining room, my mother was standing near the entrance, speaking to Audrey's mother. She saw me come in from the hallway. I watched her face shift, the same flicker, the same smooth recovery. But something had changed. Audrey's mother was looking at me differently. I found out later from Audrey herself that during the cocktail hour, a man named Drew, a Washington attorney who was an old friend of Audrey's father, had been at the bar when someone mentioned the family. Drew had apparently said, "Wait, is the sister the one who was in the Post last month? The sentencing piece?" There had been a profile. I hadn't asked for it, hadn't particularly wanted it, but the Washington Post had run a piece in their courts section about a string of high-profile national security sentences our district had handed down. My name was in it. My photograph was in it. I was quoted briefly about proportionality in federal sentencing. Drew had pulled it up on his phone at the bar. By the time I came back from my phone call, the information had moved through the room the way information does at events like this, fast, invisible, and irreversible. I did not know any of this yet. I just knew that when I returned to my table, the consultant was sitting up straighter. The cousin who'd been talking about New Mexico asked if I'd like more wine, and actually waited for my answer. And across the room, my stepfather was in conversation with Audrey's father, and I could tell by the particular stillness of my stepfather's posture that something had been said. Audrey found me near the dessert station 20 minutes later. She's a genuinely warm person, which is one of the reasons I was glad Owen had found her. "I have to tell you something," she said, and she looked both amused and slightly mortified. "Drew Faulkner, my dad's friend, the attorney, he recognized you. He showed my dad the Post piece." I nodded slowly. "My dad kind of lit up," she said. "He called you a serious person." That's a real compliment from him." "I appreciate that," I said. She hesitated. "Your mom she didn't know about the Post piece?" "My family knows what I do in a general sense," I said. "We don't get into the details much." Audrey looked at me for a moment. The kind of look that is not pity exactly, but is adjacent to it. "That seems like a lot to carry," she said. "You get used to it," I said. She hugged me, suddenly, briefly, and went to find Owen. The evening was winding down. People were gathering jackets, making rounds to say goodbye. I was standing near the window with a cup of coffee when my stepfather appeared beside me. He didn't say anything for a moment. We both looked out at the parking lot, at the line of cars pulling away. "Leigh," he said finally. "Yes." "I didn't realize. I mean, I knew you worked in law, but I didn't understand the scope of it." I waited. "The Post piece, Richard showed it to me, the federal sentencing work." He cleared his throat. "I think we've done you a disservice. In how we've introduced you. Over the years." I turned to look at him. He was a tall man, my stepfather. Silver-haired, always well-dressed. He had never once asked me about my work in all the years he'd been married to my mother. "You introduced me the way I let you," I said. "I didn't correct it." Still, I agreed. My mother came to find us. She looked between us and could tell from our posture that something had passed. She was quiet for a moment, which was unusual for her. "Richard told me," she said, "about Drew's phone." "Okay. Why didn't you tell us? About the Post, about the sentencing work, all of it." I thought about how to answer that. I thought about Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I thought about the phone call asking about my dress. I thought about it doesn't translate easily at these things. "Because you never asked," I said, "and after a while I stopped thinking you wanted to." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes were doing the thing they do when she is trying not to cry in a place where she feels she shouldn't. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know," I said. "I didn't say, I forgive you. I wasn't there yet. I don't know if I'm there now." What I said was the truth. I knew she meant it. I knew this moment was real. And I knew that knowing was going to have to be enough for tonight. Owen found me at the door when I was getting my jacket. "You're leaving already?" "I have a brief to read tonight. Court Monday morning." He shook his head and I could see him recalibrating. The same recalibration I'd watched happen across the room all evening. Leigh, why didn't you ever just say something? You never asked what case I was sitting on, Owen. Not once. In 4 years. He looked like I'd said something in a language he was still learning to translate. I didn't know to ask. I know, I said. That's the whole thing right there. He hugged me in the doorway the way he had when we were kids. Tighter this time. I let him. The valley brought my car around. A 6-year-old Subaru, nothing remarkable. And I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before I pulled out. The country club glowed behind me. Inside, my mother was probably already rewriting the story she'd tell at the next event. My daughter, the federal judge. Did you know she was profiled in the Washington Post? I understood that this too was a form of love. Not the kind I needed, but the kind she had. I drove north on Route 29 with my window cracked and the radio off. An owl crossed the headlight beam somewhere outside of Culpeper. The night was clear, and the air smelled like cut grass and the end of summer. That particular smell that means the season is making its peace. I had a 400-page brief waiting on my kitchen table. I had an emergency TRO to rule on by Monday. I had 3 clerks who would be in the office before 7 a.m. and who needed me to be clear-headed and steady and ready to do the work that the law required. I was all of those things. I'd been all of those things for 4 years, quietly, without anyone in my family asking about a single case or a single opinion or a single decision that I had made. There's a passage from Proverbs I have always kept folded in my desk drawer. Not posted anywhere, not performed, just kept. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. I have not always been patient. I have not always overlooked. But tonight on Route 29, heading back to Washington with the owl and the end of summer air, I thought maybe I understood it a little better than I had before. Glory is a quiet thing. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be announced at an engagement party or confirmed by a man pulling up a newspaper article on his phone at a bar. It just needs to be true. Mine was. I turned onto the highway and drove home to do my work. I've thought about that drive home more times than I can count. Route 29 in the dark, the owl crossing my headlights, the way the end of summer air came through the cracked window and smelled like something closing gently behind me. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing about that evening was an accident. Not in a mystical sense, but in the plain, honest sense that every outcome traces back to a decision someone made, usually long before the consequences arrived. My mother made 1,000 small decisions over 20 years to keep the peace by shrinking me down to a size that fit more comfortably in her social world. I made my own decisions, to stay quiet, to not correct her, to protect myself from a conversation that I told myself wasn't worth having. Both of us were wrong. Both of us paid for it in the currency of distance and misunderstanding. That's the part people don't want to look at. We want the villain and the victim. Cleanly drawn. But the truth of most family wounds is messier than that. I let myself be misrepresented because fighting it was exhausting and because, somewhere underneath the exhaustion, I wasn't entirely sure they could handle the real version of me. That was a failure of honesty on my part, dressed up as patience. And my mother. I don't think she was cruel. I think she was afraid. Afraid of not knowing how to claim me. Afraid that a daughter who writes federal opinions on national security cases doesn't fit the story she'd been telling about herself for 30 years. Fear dressed up as protection is still fear. It still does the same damage. What Drew's phone did that evening wasn't expose my mother. It just removed the option to keep pretending. The truth was always there. It just finally had nowhere left to hide. I think about Leigh, about myself, really. Sitting at that second-tier table eating a perfectly good filet, listening to a stranger's road trip story, choosing dignity over drama for the 100th time in my life. That's not weakness. I used to worry that it was. I used to think that the people who announce themselves the loudest are the ones who have earned the most. I was wrong. The discipline of doing excellent work in silence, of not needing the room to know, that is its own kind of strength, the kind that builds slowly, that doesn't collapse when someone fails to see it. But I also learned something harder that night. Strength without honesty is just stubbornness with good posture. I had been so committed to not needing my family's approval that I withheld the truth from them like a punishment neither of us acknowledged out loud. That wasn't integrity. That was pride wearing integrity's coat. The real thing, the version I want to carry forward, is something more like what Owen did in that doorway. He admitted he hadn't known to ask. Forward simply said, no performance, no defense. Just honest accounting. That takes a particular kind of courage, the kind that isn't flashy, the kind that most people never see. I want to be better at that. At meeting honesty with honesty instead of with strategic silence. I got home a little after 11. My clerk's memos were stacked neatly on the kitchen table. I made tea, sat down, and started reading. The work was, as always, exactly what it was: dense and necessary and mine. I was still the same person I had been that morning, but something had shifted. The way a door shifts when you finally stop leaning against it. I opened the first brief and began.